I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, I'm going to share 3 things I'll be keeping an eye on before the next USMNT roster is released for the November window, which is the Nations League quarterfinal against Jamaica. So the roster usually gets announced on the Wednesday before the international break starts. That would be November 6th. It's not always that exact Wednesday, but it should be plus or minus a few days from that November 6th, the date. So that means we're only 2 weeks away from hearing about what that next roster is going to look like. So what are the biggest things I'll be watching between now and then? Here we go. Number 1, injuries. So there was a lot of injuries for that last window in October. And let's start with the 4 players that got released from that October camp early. There was 5 of them that did leave the camp after the first match against Panama. Christian Pulisic left due to load management. But the other 4, Weston McKennie, Ricardo Pepi, Zach Steffen, and Marlon Fossey, had injuries. So let's check on how they're doing. Ricardo Pepi did play last weekend. He came on in the 78th minute against AZ Alkmaar, which that's about normal for him. That's normally when he kind of comes in at the end of games for Luke de Jong, so he appears to be okay. Marlon Fossey, he did not start for Standard Liège, but he did come on in the 57th minute and played the rest of the way for them, so it looks like he's doing okay too. Weston McKennie did not make the matchday squad for Juventus over the weekend against Lazio, but what I'm reading is that was mostly precautionary due to some, I believe, muscle fatigue he was having. I think they're expecting him back this week for the Champions League match, so we'll keep an eye on that. And then Zach Steffen also didn't play over the weekend in the Rapids' last match against Austin FC. Again, heard that was very precautionary. They just want to save him for the playoffs, which start this weekend for the Rapids. So mostly it looks like those 4 guys are going to be okay, but I'm going to be just keeping an eye on their injury status over these next couple of weeks. Let's talk about some guys that were not in camp because of injuries. Tim Weah. So he hadn't played for a while against Juventus, but he did play this weekend for them against Lazio. He came on in the 54th minute, so that's great news. Johnny Cardoso, he started and went the full 90 over the weekend for Real Betis, so it looks like he's doing okay. And then Tyler Adams made the matchday squad for Bournemouth for the first time for the first time this season, and so he didn't play, but that was good news. So there's 3 guys that have been injured that did play. They weren't in the last U.S. camp because of injuries, but they did play. And so again, I want to keep an eye on those 3 guys and how they're progressing, in the coming weeks. Let's talk about some guys that are not playing. Cameron Carter-Vickers didn't make the matchday squad over the weekend for Celtic. Chris Richards also didn't make the matchday squad for Crystal Palace. I just read recently, I think it was today, that the manager said he's not expecting Chris Richards to be back until after the next international break, so not looking good for him. Gio Reyna, of course, also injured, not expected to return before the international break. Fuller Balogun hurt his shoulder. He's expected out for 2 months, so he's not going to be back. Luca de la Torre, still haven't heard much about him at all, actually, at Celta de Vigo, but he hasn't been playing. And then Serginho Dest, as we know, he's definitely going to be out until after the first of the year. So, of those guys, it doesn't look like really. Well, maybe Cameron Carter-Vickers. I haven't heard. I know he's having some kind of a toe or a foot injury. He's one to keep an eye on. I don't know. I haven't heard a timeline for his return, but it looks like, Chris Richards, Gio Reyna, Fuller and Balogun, Luca de la Torre, and Serginho Dest. Looks pretty certain that they're all going to be out and probably won't be available for the next November camp. So that's the injuries. Going to be keeping a real close eye on them. And that leads me to the number 2 thing I'm going to be looking for when it comes to what I'm going to be watching for in these next couple of weeks before the roster comes out, and that's who are some players that could come in and who are some players that could be left out. Who could be in? Well, we just talked about a couple of the guys that have been injured. Tim Weah, Tyler Adams, Johnny Cardoso. They all missed the last camp. Could they make it back into this November camp? Will they play enough? I think for Cardoso, it's probably pretty likely, as long as he keeps playing. Tim Weah, I would say maybe. I mean, he's missed a lot of time this season. I don't know how much they want to risk him. But if he starts playing a lot of minutes and looks okay, possibly he could make it in. Now, Tyler Adams, I personally sincerely hope that he does not get called in. Nothing against him. He's had such a terrible run of injuries these last couple of years. I would prefer just to leave him at Bournemouth, let him just ramp up his minutes, let him be comfortable there, let him just follow his recovery, get better, and then, next year when he's proven that he's still healthy and can play the minutes, then bring him in for that camp. But it'll be an interesting decision if Mauricio Pochettino wants to bring him in at least to, meet him, get to know him, let him know what him and his staff are all about. That's going to be a big decision that I think he's going to have to make. Who are some other guys that could come in? Well, does Pochettino maybe want to get a look at another goalkeeper, like a Gaga Slonina or somebody like that? Does he want to get a look at another guy like a Leonard Maloney in the midfield, who seems to fit a lot of the profile in terms of the, that Pochettino's always talking about this compete that he wants to see. And Maloney's a guy that seems to play and go hard, all the time. Cade Cowell, had missed a lot of time with Chivas. He's back playing now. Is he maybe a winger that Pochettino might want to bring in, especially if Weah if they're gonna leave him in Europe for the break. So that's some of the things I'll be looking for, is how are those players performing, how are their injuries progressing, when it comes to who could be into the camp, who could be out of the camp. And then the last thing, number 3, that I'll be watching for in these next couple weeks is if anybody can make their mark in the Champions League and have a really good performance. So, Christian Pulisic is definitely a guy I'm going to be keeping my eye on. Maybe the only complaint with him last season was that he got a lot of goals and a lot of assists, but he didn't get a lot in the biggest matches. This season, it looks like he's already turned that around. He has a goal against the Derby against Inter. He had a goal against Liverpool in their Champions League matchup earlier this season. Would just love to see him continue to play well in these big games, and the Champions League is definitely an opportunity for him to do that. They have Club Brugge and Real Madrid before the next international break, those 2 matches. So you want to play big in a big game? I mean, Real Madrid especially would be a great opportunity to make your mark there. Same with the PSV guys. Tillman, Pepe, Ledesma. They're going to be playing against PSG and Girona in their 2 Champions League matchups before the international break. And, Tillman's another guy that I think when I interviewed Rick Elfrink, the journalist who over in Eindhoven who covers the team, he was saying they're still waiting for Pepe in the biggest matches to have a great game. I'm sorry. He said they're still waiting for Tillman in the biggest matches to have a big game. And so can he do that in the Champions League? Pepe had a big Champions League goal last season. Can he get into one of these games with more minutes and make a difference? Juve has their Champions League matches against Stuttgart and Lille. So McKennie, Weah, what can they do in this top level competition? Same with Celtic, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Austin Trusty. They have matches against Atalanta and RB Leipzig in this window. And so, just really looking to see if some of these players can make their mark in the Champions League, which will be great for them. Some of these guys are already established, like Christian Pulisic, but some of these guys who maybe are on the bubble of the team or on the fringes of the team, can they have a Champions League performance that maybe puts them over the edge of making the team? So there you go. That's the 3 things I'll be watching for between now and the next USMNT roster announcement, which again, I expect to come out somewhere around November 6th. Thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else, thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.